Happy Sabbath. Again, my name is Sharon Willis. Out of darkness, flowers can bloom, and love can live again. I was 18 when I met him, and he was 25. And from that point on, all I knew was him. It didn't necessarily start out abusive, but looking back, all the signs were there, especially the control, what to wear, where to go, and how I should behave. As a teenager trying to be grown, I took this all as he was looking out for me, that he cared about me and wanted to protect me. The first incident that comes to mind, we were at prayer meeting. Our children were 4, 3, and 2, and I was standing with him at the end of service because I dare not venture off. It would be an argument, and I was just trying to avoid that. As I stood there, a man said something very inappropriate to me, and I was speechless. And I waited for him to defend me, but that never happened. Instead, on the way home, which we live right around the corner from the church, we argued. He said I was supposed to stand up for him and should have responded. Well, I said the same thing to him about him. It ended with him trying to push me out the car while he was moving. And at that point, my life changed. Progressively, it got worse. To the point of physical abuse, having a gun put in my mouth. I've lost partial hearing in my right ear from a gun being shot right, like this close to me and going past my ear. My children were all very young. When that happened, I believe Nadi was like 4, 4.5, 5 years old. And then he went to prison. And he was gone for 5 years. But then the control and the manipulation had already began, so even while he was in prison, I was in prison for 5 years. Excessively calling, wanting to know what was going on with the bills and where was I going and who was I going to see, and bringing the children every week to the point that I was going to see him every weekend that I fell asleep on the road and totaled my car with my 3 kids inside. And at that point, I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore, as far as visiting every weekend. And then at one point, I filed for divorce while he was in prison getting ready to come home, and he convinced me to put it off. So I put it off, and I said, okay, you got 6 months. 6 months to convince me, 6 months to make me feel like you really love me, that you're gonna change and we're gonna work this out. And foolishly, I let him back in the home. And the abuse was even worse. And not only was it physical abuse, because it was emotional abuse. And to me, emotional abuse is that mental abuse where you don't even know if your thoughts are your own. You don't know if this opinion is really your opinion. And I didn't realize that. It took 23 years for me to say, okay, enough is enough, and to leave. And even then, as a Christian woman, as a pastor's child, you want to be that dutiful wife. You want to be that Christian woman, and you don't want to break up your home and your family. But what happens is when you don't do that, you cause more damage to your family and to your children than if you had just left at the first sign of abuse. So all the kids were out of the house, were away in college. Nadia was home for a while, and we had gotten a real big argument, and I said, okay, I'm done, and I left. And I said, the only way I'll come back is if we go to counseling. And we had tried counseling before, but it was always a disaster. But I was like, we'll try counseling. So we went to counseling session. The first one, it was semi-okay. The second one, he was mad because I was not coming home. And so we set up in the office, and the therapist is trying to do her work, and he's arguing with the therapist, and finally she was like, okay, stop. I can't do this anymore. She's like, I can't be your therapist. And she said, Sharon, if you want me to continue to counsel you, I will counsel you. And he can go get his own therapy, and then maybe you guys can come back again. at a different time. And she's like, or you maybe can just find a different marriage counselor. She's like, it's up to you. And I sat there, and at that point, that was my big breaking point. Because I said, nope, I'm staying, he can leave. And he got so mad, and I'm crying, and I'm frustrated, and all these emotions are welling up in me because this has been 23 years of physical and mental breakdown. And so I sat there and I didn't realize it was a love seat. And I didn't realize until after he left, I was literally in the corner, almost balled up on her couch. And she said, if I hadn't seen the interaction between you guys, I wouldn't be able to tell you this as a therapist, but that's emotional abuse. And I was like, what's that? You know, because you hear about physical abuse growing up. You see that, you know what that is. I was like, well, what's emotional abuse? I'm not being emotionally abused. And she's like, well, I'm going to send you some articles. So she sent me 3 articles to read, and they're long. And for all you guys who are in social work and psychology, and I'm reading all these medical terms, and I'm like, okay. So I called my best friend, who's my cousin Heather, who's also a psychologist. I said, Heather, do you think I'm in an abusive marriage, an emotionally abusive marriage? She's like, well, I'm going to send you some articles. And I was like, you can't just tell me. Like, you know me, you've seen everything, can you not? She's like, I'm gonna send you some articles. So she did. And one of the articles she did was 30, I think it was 30 points of signs you're in a physically, emotionally abusive relationship. And I checked 26 of those boxes. And I said, okay, all right. And it was around Thanksgiving time. Actually this time of year, and I was house sitting for a friend. I said, okay, I'm going to take the time, and I'm going to pray, and I'm going to ask God, what should I do? Because I did not want to stay in that state. Once something is shown to me, I can't just ignore it. So I prayed about it, and we had talked, and we had argued, and he felt like I was betraying him, and of course, all the things that he would say where, you know, I was choosing a therapist over him and so many different things. So finally I was like, okay, I'm going to file for divorce. And I did. And the effects of abuse, of course, do not just go away. Mental abuse is almost like it's a web in your brain, and you have to start detangling all these strings and all these thought patterns and all these things about yourself, because I didn't have confidence in who I was. I didn't believe I was beautiful. I didn't believe I was worthy of love, and I thought I was broken. And so once I went through the process, and I continued counseling, because counseling was very instrumental to me and very helpful for me, is when I began to see myself as God sees me. Amen. And I began to speak out, because everybody you guys know who he is. You guys have seen him preach. You guys have seen him interact with the kids. He's counseled up at Peterson. So it was like, when we got divorced, people were like, oh my goodness, I thought you guys were so perfect together, and why are you not together anymore? And so I literally stayed away from church for almost 2 years, these last 2 years, because I didn't want to deal with the questions and the looks of why I had left him. And then finally, my cousin again encouraged me not only to speak and to write my story. And so that is why I'm here, is to tell my story that, again, out of darkness, flowers can bloom and love can live again. And I know by telling my story that others will be set free, and they will not feel alone, because unfortunately we like to keep this stuff hidden underneath covers, and it needs not to be hidden underneath covers. There's so many young women who, from when I started saying on Facebook, have inboxed me and said, I'm so glad that you said something, and can you pray for me? And this is what I'm going through, and how did you deal with it, and what made you finally leave, and you're strong, and that's why I tell, because it's embarrassing to me at times. But I know that life happens and choices are made. And what I tell young people, I will leave it with this. What I tell young people is honor your father and your mother. My mom warned me. And I was thinking, you're just being overprotective. You don't understand. You've never done anything wrong. You're this saintly woman. You have no clue what's going on. And she was so concerned. And my mom's clingy as it is, but she was overly clingy. And I didn't listen because I thought I knew what I was doing at 18 years old. And for the half of my life, I suffered. And I do not want another young person, female, male, to go through that again. When your parents tell you something, it's wisdom. Amen. And God speaks through them. So please, please listen. And that's what I'll leave it.